Hi, I'm Adam Steele for Hot Pole Studios, and today we're going to have a little chat about why I hate Pro Tools. Okay, so I don't really hate Pro Tools, but I'm not a big fan of it, and I'll tell you quite a few reasons why. I mean, there's loads to go at. Pro Tools is one of those things that, as I was beginning to learn audio production, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, it was the thing. It was the standard. It was the top of the range, and justifiably so. Mainly, I think, because at the time there was pretty much only one version, and that was the hardware version. So before HD and not HD, the version was the HD version. It wasn't cheap at all, but a standard home computer or even a powerful computer could not handle recording lots of tracks in real time. It couldn't handle all the editing functions. It couldn't really handle, if you wanted to add like a virtual delay or a compressor or anything, you just weren't getting that done because the processor would not handle it. And getting any sort of round trip latency was just not really possible. And DigiDesign, before Avid came along, DigiDesign's Pro Tools was one of the systems that was fast, it was usable, it was a legitimate replacement for a tape machine. And at the time, a tape machine might cost you a couple of $1,000, and a 20-minute, 24-track tape costed then, and still costs now, somewhere between $600 and $1,000 per tape. So if you were to spend $10,000 on a Pro Tools system, that would pay for itself within about 2 months. Because for a working studio who were already charging those kind of rates, you could lower your rates a little bit, maybe, and bring people in, and then you're not going to have those ongoing costs. For a professional studio, that made some sense. And at the time, I mean, Pro Tools has always been notorious for being a bit unstable and crashing every now and again. But if a tape gets chewed up by the machine, same thing, it's a gamble. You know, you do what you can, you back everything up regularly. You know, that's how you should be working. And the time that the studios wouldn't have to be rewinding the tape and locating everything was saving massive amounts of time. However, as time went on, competitors emerged. As PCs and Macs got faster, it turned out that you didn't actually need all this hardware to record anymore. Like, Cubase came along, Cubase SX, and I spent a lot of time in my younger years using Cubase SX2 and 3, and I could record 24 channels of audio at once on a non-Pro Tools system, like £1,000, $1,000 system. And it didn't crash. And with Cubase came the VST standard, which is now kind of, you know, Pro Tools had RTAS when that came along, so that's something we'll talk about, and Cubase had VST. But they made VST in such a way that everybody could program for it, and a load of like homemade VSTs came out. Now that brings us onto a topic. The homemade thing meant that prices could be reasonable. Whereas if you were to develop for Pro Tools, you had to be certified. You had to be, you know, tested within, you know, a millionth of a degree, which is great. It meant that it worked in professional studios, but it cost you thousands for plugins, which is why like the early Waves bundles for Pro Tools would cost loads. But for some of the guys at the top tier, that was absolutely fine because, again, working costs, better sounds, reliability, fine. But the reason that I'm not a big fan of Pro Tools in 2018 is that as time's gone on, a lot of the guys who grow up using Pro Tools look at the competitors and go, well, this is a tenth of the price, what's the difference? And then you start to realise that there really isn't much of a difference now. Especially as audio interfaces have got better, latency on interfaces has got really good. There was a point when I think it was Pro Tools 8 or 9 came out, and around that time Avid bought DigiDesign as well, in that kind of time period, that they were really beginning to struggle because they decided to make Pro Tools HD as the hardware platform, Pro Tools LE was the software, and they limited what you could do to a certain number of tracks, a certain number of buses, and said, oh, you can't do more than that. And we're going, well, why not? And they're going, well, your computer couldn't handle it. And I'm like, yes, it could. That should be up to me to decide, not you. Whereas Cubase didn't have those kind of limits unless you got like the really cheap version Cubasis, which was really cheap and came free with a lot of things. Or there was Pro Tools M powered, which was like LE but came with the M audio interfaces because they were kind of owned with that kind of stuff. I remember trying to use it and being really, really limited. 24 tracks sounds like a lot, but once you've factored in all your things like your reverb sends and all that kind of stuff, it's really not. And you can hit a brick wall very quickly. I mean, some of the modern mixes that I do, even if I'm using fairly stripped down band orchestration, might be 40 or 50 tracks once you count every single drum mic, 2 mics on every guitar cabinet. You know, because I like to not render things down. I mean, a lot of guys will try and combat that by saying, oh, well, you should commit. That's one way of working. And in my mind, I like to commit, but then, you know, a way down the way, if I'm getting towards the mastering stage and I realise that I could do with changing a microphone blend, I still have that option without going back and having to go back to old projects. On what I use, which is Reaper. Reaper is my tool of choice. Reaper is my tool of choice. Cubase is something that I used to use quite a lot. I've tried FL Studio, but that's kind of on the simpler end for me. I respect a lot of guys that use Ableton Live, but that's more focused towards electronic musicians. Reason is, I mean, yeah, if you're insane and a sadist or a masochist, then go ahead and use Reason if that's your thing. Hey, I'm not judging. The Studio One, there's so many options now that it's become not the standard anymore. Pro Tools, and that's a big thing. So I don't hate it, but everything that I could do in Pro Tools I can do quicker in something else. Pro Tools, the non-HD version, I found really suffers from not being very well optimized. That if I'm running a load of plugins on channels, it will suddenly sometimes stop and just tell me, oh, well, your CPU usage was so high that we just had to stop. Why did you stop? Why didn't you just carry on? Maybe glitch out, maybe. I mean, using something like Cubase, I can use the same number of plugins with no problem. If I put too many on, it starts to pop and crackle. Sometimes I get to that limit, maybe if I'm working at 96 kilohertz and I'm absolutely overloading the thing. I know that. However, having the option to just carry on regardless can sometimes be make or break. And if I get one little glitch in what was the best take of the day, and it just so happens that that word I had on another take, I'd rather take that than have the machine just stop halfway through. Tape machines don't stop because they were overloaded, and neither does any other DAW that I know of. Reaper certainly doesn't, and Reaper's so well optimized, I can load it with plugins and it just carries on. Delay compensation. I mean, in all but the most recent versions of Pro Tools, if you had a plugin that had latency on, yes, if you recorded it, you get that latency, but then when you hit play, it should be put back where it was supposed to be. And Cubase does that, Reaper does that, Pro Tools never did, and I don't know if it does still. And little things like if I name a track in Reaper or Cubase and it's got a really long name because I'm trying to get some description in there, it stays. In Pro Tools, there's only so many letters you can use. So I see these Grammy Award winning mixes in Pro Tools that have track names that are like guitar lift, and it's like, what's that supposed to tell me? And they've had to have the notes section open and put all this in a separate thing just to be able to decode their own writing. And it shouldn't have to be this way. And that's that's one of the best examples as well is offline bouncing, offline rendering. Not that long ago in Pro Tools, that was the big fanfare is now you don't have to do the whole thing in real times. And every other DAW manufacturer looked at them and went, well done. We've been doing that for years. 15 years ago, was exporting from Cubase at 2 or 3 times the speed of the mix with no loss in quality. And looking at the Pro Tools guys and going, haha. And, but that just sums up Pro Tools for me. If there's something that newer designed DAWs do that comes along that is new, you're not going to see that in Pro Tools for years. And if you are, it's going to be some sort of kind of, look at us singing, dancing, or it's going to be an extra paid feature, or it's going to be something that bogs the system down. I mean, I got a copy of Pro Tools First recently for a demo video that you might have seen, and that was something like a 2.5 gigabyte download for Pro Tools First, which is it's the cloud-based thing that can only do, I think it's either 4 or 8 tracks and can only actually store 3 songs. What do I need 2.5 gigabytes of stuff for? Reaper's an 11 megabyte download. Which, considering that they're very comparable programs, what's the rest of that file size? It's crap. It's sample banks that I didn't ask for. It's plugins that shouldn't take up nearly as much space as they do. It's all the extra stuff that tries to justify their price model. Steinberg are guilty of this as well, by the way. Cubase comes on a DVD of several gigabytes, and I look at it and I install what I want and take up about 150 megabytes, because it's like, I don't want all this extra stuff. The synths that I use, I go out and find the ones that I like. The drum VSTs, I go and find the ones that I want that never come stock. The Slate Everything bundle is my jam in terms of compressors, EQs, everything. And I've jumped into a Pro Tools session before, very recently, because one was brought into the studio. And that's generally the only time I work with Pro Tools is if a band brings a Pro Tools session in. And all the EQs and everything sounded terrible. So I just, because I already had all the Slate mix rack and everything installed, they worked naturally with Pro Tools, and I just used them on every channel. And Pro Tools just became a vehicle for what I was already doing. And then it had the gall to try and complain at me and tell me that it was getting CPU overloads. And then I had a very similar mix with pretty much the identical setup in Reaper with the processor going at 25% usage. And I'm looking at it like, why? Why is Pro Tools telling me that it's maxing out when either it shouldn't be or it actually isn't? Neither of which is great. There's so much more that I could go on about, but whenever I get sent a mix by a client now, they will volunteer the information of what DAW they're using, and I just go, don't know, don't care, don't want to hear it. Because no matter what DAW they're using, even if it's the one I'm using, the chance of it being the exact same version that I've got with all the exact same plugins is practically nil. So I ask for WAV files from start to end, either 24-bit or 32-bit if you can, in the sample rate it was recorded at, and then it's completely platform agnostic. It may as well have come off a multi-track tape. And that means that I get to work in the platform I'm comfortable with at a speed I'm comfortable at, which is fast, by the way, because I'm not slowed down by a lot of the Pro Tools stuff. I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to wrap this up now because it could go on for days. So, yeah, that's why I hate Pro Tools. So, I'm sure there are going to be guys in the comments like, well, I've used Pro Tools for years and it's been absolutely fine for me. Good for you. All right. But I can bet you that if you went and sat down at a newer system and learnt how to use it, within a couple of months you'd be going, why didn't I do that sooner? Because that's what happened to me when I moved from learning Pro Tools to Cubase, and happened again moving from Cubase to Reaper. and I am now able to use them all, but given a choice, I know what I'm going to use. So that's my verdict on this subject. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this little kind of rant discussion. Hit the like button if you found it useful, and subscribe to the channel. We've got things like we've got a Positive Grid Bias Amp 2 demo review coming up soon. We've got the weekly viewers' comments, guitar and tech news, the Hopcast. And on Fridays, we do a live broadcast looking at how to mix, how to use certain software, how to use different plugins effectively. So hopefully there's something there for you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.